Welcome to the Aid Market Podcast, where foreign aid partners connect to learn about key funding trends and market insight. The podcast is co-hosted by Aid Connect Data, the trusted USAID pipeline and market intel software, and Connected International, the leading USAID partnering support consulting firm. Now, here's your host, Mike Shanley.
Hello and welcome to the Aid Market Podcast. Our guest today is Jim Richardson. Jim is the former director of the Office of Foreign Assistance at the State Department. And I was very much looking forward to our conversation today, Jim, obviously given everything that's happened since the election. So first off, thank you for being on the podcast today to share your insight. And want to just get started right away with, what is your take on what's happened since the election with the Foreign Assistance Executive Order and the funding freeze? And have you been surprised by what happened?
Yeah, no, thanks, Mike. I appreciate the opportunity to be on the program. I have been surprised, mostly. I think the first thing to say is that foreign assistance aligns to the priorities of the president, or at least it should. And a lot of what Elon Musk and others have discovered around the USAID programming is not surprising to me at all, because it aligns perfectly with the Biden administration and what they were trying to accomplish around the world. That said, USAID and foreign assistance should absolutely align to the priorities of President Trump and what he wants to accomplish around the world as well. And so I expected there to be some sort of freeze to align programs, make sure that we stop doing things that the President Trump didn't want to do, and start doing things that President Trump did want to do. And that is perfectly fair and perfectly appropriate. I was surprised by the scope of the freeze, and I was surprised by the lack of clarity around exemptions and those types of things. And you know, this is important, weighty stuff that matters to people around the world, matters to American national security. And so I think that's an important thing for us to think about. So I was surprised. I think the President Trump does deserve to have the foreign assistance programs that help him accomplish the mission that he wants to and he has for around the world. And hopefully over the coming weeks, we can get to a place where this makes sense for him, that he understands the types of programs that USAID and the State Department and MCC and DFC and all the other agencies doing foreign assistance, how that can work together in concert and deliver real results for the American people.
So you were at State a few years ago when there was a conversation about a USAID State Department merger. Could you take us through the conversation? And then obviously we all know the decision, but what was the decision? What were the reasons for it at that time?
Sure. Yeah. So actually, this was before I was at State. So I was at USAID. I was, not technically employee number one from the Trump administration, but pretty close. And I was the coordinator of the transformation. So the USAID State Department reorganization. It was both an internal to USAID process and a joint process with the State Department. And there was lots of conversations about whether USAID and state should merge. And ultimately, the whole sort of effort fizzled out for lots of political reasons, but from a practical reason, we didn't really see any real cost savings because there wasn't a lot of duplication between state and USAID, right? They both do democracy, but operate in different spaces, different approaches. So there wasn't that type of true duplication that you'd want, that you would find efficiencies by doing a merger. The staff are very different in terms of their competence and sort of how what they bring to the table. USAID, it's really focused on project design and program integration, those types of things. It's just, development professionals have certain skill sets that honestly the State Department doesn't. And it's not a criticism. It's just the State Department is focused on the diplomacy side of the equation. They don't have the warrant officers. They don't have a lot of the contracting authorities, the grant expertise, the expertise around monitoring, evaluation, performance, outcomes. Those are things that are really specialties of USAID. And when we looked at the lessons learned around the U.S. Information Agency merger back in the late 90s, we really saw, hey, we really want to make sure that capacity, that ability to do those things that matter, both from an implementation standpoint, but also an accountability standpoint with the American people and Congress, we want to make sure that those capacities remain. And by merging, you may not necessarily get that. That said, merger isn't a crazy idea. I mean, obviously, every other aid agency around the world has now been merged, as far as I'm aware. The Brits have done it, the Australians, the Canadians, the Dutch, right? The French, the Japanese, like everybody has gone to that model of merging with their Minister of Foreign Affairs. And so if that's the decision they wanted to make, and there's pros and cons to it, you can do that. But it needs to be done thoughtfully and strategically, and it'll take time to do that. But we'll see what the administration ultimately decides on that piece. Obviously, the courts are weighing in. Congress is going to weigh in. They start their hearings this week. It'll be fascinating to see how those hearings go. I know there are more hearings planned later in the month. And then obviously the first real action that Congress gets to weigh in on this will be the CR. And I think we're about 5 weeks away from a CR needing to be passed. So Congress will need to weigh in. And so we'll see what that all looks like. And then we'll be able to better understand where we're going here from there.
Great. Thanks, Jim. And for those of you listening later, this is recorded on February 11th, just for reference points on the timelines Jim noted there. So Jim, where do you see this settling? Really two questions. In about 6 to 9 months, so we'll say by the end of 2025, as well as what do you see this foreign assistance looking like 5 years from now after the next presidential election?
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I am terrible at anticipating the future, because I was totally wrong. Going into the Trump administration, going into the president's victory in November, I really thought there was an opportunity to have conversations around leadership structure, and I still hope there are. And that's one of the things that I truly believed it was an important conversation to have. And I still think that it's the right conversation to have, is how do we actually have somebody who can manage foreign assistance across the U.S. government? And whether that's an empowered director of foreign assistance, who's also the administrator, or whether that's somebody at the White House. But we have 20 different agencies running foreign assistance. And the idea that it's just coordinated at post by chief of mission authority, I think is nice, but it's wholly insufficient. And having those ability, having somebody at the State Department or at the White House, where President Trump can say, hey, you go and help negotiate some deal with Kenya, and be able to bring in a suite of options on the foreign assistance side and make a deal. I think that would be really appealing to the president. And I think foreign assistance can be an important part of whatever deal he wants to make with whatever country he's looking to do a deal with. So I still think that leadership conversation is really important. Other pieces, honestly, I think we're probably, the budget is too big. I think, we are sort of at an historic high. It's gone down. Congress has started to come down a little bit during the Biden administration. I think that'll continue to ratchet down. I think we're probably in too many countries. And I think both from a footprint perspective, having so many missions, I think that's probably, doesn't allow for the impact of whatever remaining assistance funding we have. I think we probably do need to focus in. I hope that happens. And then in terms of what the structure looks like, I have no idea. I hope that there's better coordination across the U.S. government when it comes to foreign assistance. And this isn't just USAID and state and MCC and DFC, but it's the micro agencies, it's the USTDA, it's the U.S. Africa Development Foundation, it's Department of Agriculture, it's Commerce, right? All these folks have important programs that really need to be working in synergy in order to advance what President Trump is wanting to accomplish.
And what's the difference if that coordination is the, say, director of the Office of Foreign Assistance within state or at USAID, and whether USAID is an independent agency or, I don't know, a bureau, a department within state? Is there a difference there?
There is, and I think if you look at the model for an empowered director of foreign assistance, Condoleezza Rice put that position in the State Department and had that person dual-hatted with the administrator. And the reason being is that the Secretary Rice wanted to have that person to have the authority and power structures that the State Department can provide. Like the State Department is, the first agency or first department. It matters to the president. It matters to every country that you go around the world. Having somebody who can speak on behalf of both the Secretary of State and the administrator, and hopefully the president as well, that's what's going to be able to deliver real results. And so you really need to be able to have somebody with that type of stature and level. And I think that's one of the reasons that Secretary Rice made that decision. So I do think there's some value in having that position at the State Department and dual-hatted with the administrator. But we'll see. There's lots of opportunities for thinking outside the box. Hopefully Congress is starting to think about these issues as well, and they'll have some opinions about that as well. But I hope that they don't just stop at better state USAID coordination. That gets you 50% there, maybe 60. But there's so many other tools and resources and assets around the federal government that really need to be harnessed. And it doesn't need to be necessarily consolidation, but it does need to be better coordination.
So one of the challenges we've seen so far with clients and with partners in the foreign assistance is just a lack of clarity in terms of how to respond. Do you think internally with the administration, I know maybe this is a little bit too speculative, Jim, so feel free to, pass if it is, but is there an understanding of maybe the lack of clarity in terms of what to do, keep staff, let staff go, maintain readiness? Is this a shutdown? Is this a stop work? Do you want us to relaunch? Do you think there was an understanding by those, maybe the decision makers, the influencers within the administration of terms of what those repercussions would be, or yeah.
Yeah. It's really hard for me to say. I really don't know. I do think it's important for implementing partners and for people who care about foreign aid to talk about it, right? Obviously there's lots of information out there on the internet about USAID and about their programs. Some of it is true. Some of these programs did what they said, and because they align to what President Biden wanted to accomplish. Some of them are actually State Department programs. They have nothing to do with USAID at all. Some of them aren't true. Some of them are some of these are really important, democracy programs that make a difference in countries around the world. And I think it's important to share that information, share that with the State Department, share that with the White House, and share that with Congress. And there's going to be there's a lot of heat around these issues right now. I think there'll be a little bit of tempering over the next couple of weeks as hearings start ramping up and people being able to share sort of what this really looks like and what the impact really is, and whether President Trump really wants to have these tools in his arsenal. And I think, to me, that's ultimately what it comes down to is foreign assistance I believe foreign assistance is an important tool of our national security profile. And it's just like diplomacy, just like our military, our intelligence communities, they all bring something unique that allow for the president to be able to get the best deal he can. And I really hope that he sees foreign assistance as a tool that can work for his agenda. And then how he wants to organize it, how much of it he wants to have. Those are great conversations that he'll have with Congress, and we'll see what the ultimate results are.
So let's go deeper into that in terms of the best arguments or ways to talk about the role of foreign assistance. Which ones do you think are resonating most with the decision makers, which we've seen are different than Trump 1, even in Trump 2? Which of those arguments do you see resonating, or do you think resonate most strongly with both the priorities, the America First priorities of the administration, as well as how they like to do business and how they like to operate?
No, I think that's a great question. It's hard for me to tell which argument would be the most impactful, but what resonates to me is that President Trump has really clear agenda. He obviously putting America first across our foreign policy is essential. But that's a macro, right? What are the strategic things you want to accomplish? How do you want to counter China? How do you want to do stem the flow of outflow migration or allow for repatriation? How do you want to focus on trade deals and getting the best trade deals possible? How do we want to grow our economy domestically? But there's all of these priorities don't necessarily feel like, oh, that's foreign assistance can help achieve that, but it can. And I think for us, I think the argument I would make to the president is, you tell me what you want to accomplish, and I'll tell you how foreign assistance can help you get there. I want the president to succeed. Obviously, I voted for him, right? And I'm a member of his party, strong supporter. And so, but in order for him to be the most successful as possible, he needs to have foreign assistance as an important tool to help him get there. And I've just used China as an example, right? China is not going to pull back on its Belt and Road Initiative, on its development agenda around the world, just because we've pulled back. They're going to double down. They're going to push harder. And is that acceptable, or is that not acceptable, right? Do we want to really compete? And I don't think we've successfully competed against China around the world. And I created the first Countering China initiative called Clear Choice Initiative at USAID when I was at the agency. And that was an important conversation, an important step forward to really start focusing missions on how our foreign assistance can help be used to counter China. I think we have to take that further. I think we need to double down on those efforts. I think we need to hold countries more accountable. We can use foreign assistance to create that accountability. I think that's completely fair. But I would hope the president would want to utilize the tool, and I think he will. I think he will want to utilize the tool to counter China that the foreign assistance brings, rather than just ignore it and say, no, I don't want to use it. I think the president loves deals. I think he loves to make progress on behalf of the American people, and I just think that foreign assistance can help him do that.
As you're obviously very familiar with the State Department portfolio, USAID, does one or two projects come to mind that are a good example of that, of a USAID project that is countering Chinese influence in whichever region or country it took place in?
Yeah, no, like there's a lot of them. Congress did a great job. They created a Countering China fund that was really sort of a blue sky opportunity to have that deep conversation. I think every country is different, and this is why development is so hard. It's so tactical in a way. But I think having advisors be able to help countries review loan agreements with China and be able to determine whether these agreements are actually, like, what the implications of these would be, I think that's hugely helpful. Countries don't want to be in the back pocket of China. Like, they're not interested in doing that. And by us sharing more information about what that means and sort of helping them do an analysis of that, I think can really matter. During the pandemic, look, we were the country of choice when it comes to the vaccine or getting PPE, right? They wanted to work with us because they didn't believe that China was a good partner, but they sometimes had to work with China because that's just what was offered. And so we can compete. Countries would much rather work with the West in all that we offer than work with China, but we have to be willing to offer them something interesting and something that is enticing. And I think if you have a coordinated effort, I think if you have a clear strategy about what you want to accomplish in a country, think about it macro perspective from diplomacy through trade, and I think foreign assistance can play an important role in helping the president achieve agendas all around the world.
I'm just going to go another level deeper there, Jim. I think it's I don't know, hope it's not too obvious, but okay, so specifically, how does countering Chinese influence globally support American national security and U.S. foreign interests? You've kind of touched on it already, but I think I just wanted to rephrase the question and to kind of hear a more nuanced take on that.
Yeah, no, and I'm a China hawk, so I start with my bias. I do think that China is the true competitor that we have. China is now, I would call them a vassal state of Xi Jinping. But the Chinese Communist Party has a very aggressive global agenda that counters exactly where the U.S. and the West are. The U.S. and Western approach globally and how we have structured a system, a democratic systems of government, how we've embraced rule of law, how we've championed land rights, how we've championed economic growth and capitalist model. That's what's the underpinning of the Western approach. This is Europe, this is Japan, South Korea, the United States, much of Latin America and South America, right? This is the heart of sort of the Western world. And China just has or let's just say, not the Chinese people, but the Chinese Communist Party has a very different approach and a very different vision of the world and the US's role in it, right? Xi Jinping believes in the demise and the decline of the American dream and the U.S. Honestly, he doesn't want America to be great again, right? He is looking for a decline of a Western and American power to allow for an ascent of the Chinese future. And I think that's at odds with what countries are really looking for. And I think it's at odds with U.S. national security interests writ large.
Looking geographically, then, how much should be read into Secretary Rubio's first trip being to Latin America, Panama, Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, I think one or two other countries in there? Presumably, focuses what kind of activities can be done there to stop or slow forced migration to the U.S. border. Do you anticipate there to be a strong focus, maybe pulling back, maybe that's the wrong word, maybe focus is a better word, on the Western Hemisphere and Latin America? Or maybe is that reading in a little bit too much and just coincidentally that was the top priority at the start of this administration?
Well, look, I mean, the very first thing he did was he went to Panama to try to keep the Chinese Communist Party out from regulating U.S. shipping, right? This is deeply tied to the U.S. national security interests and our ability and our sort of argument that China can't dictate the terms of the road in terms of the global economy. People, when they're forced to choose, we think they will want to choose the U.S. The Panamanians did. And that's great. And much credit to Secretary Rubio and his team for making that happen. But look, China is definitely very involved in Africa. They are very aggressive in their push in South and Latin America. So this isn't the Chinese Communist Party out in some other hemisphere. They're deeply pushing their agenda contrary to the U.S. agenda in our own backyard. And honestly, they're doing it here in America as well. They're at your local PTA meeting. I mean, they are buying playgrounds for your local schools. And if you think they're doing it because they like you, that's a mistake. There is a clear agenda. They're running a huge spy operation here in the United States, but they're inside the gates, right? They're truly um, uh, they sure believe that we are the enemy, and President Trump has consistently articulated that he fully understands the threat and is willing to take the steps necessary to push back. And it goes back to foreign aid. Foreign aid could be an important part of his ability to push back effectively on the CCP around the world.
So going to that point, thank you, Jim. What are the best chance? So sharing the story of the work of USAID programs and foreign assistance programs, generally how it supports national security, what supports America first, counters China's growing influence globally. What are the best channels, both I would say to government as well as to the American public,
Yeah.
to be sharing those stories on?
That's for a really smart lobbyist or a really smart public affairs person to answer. I think that it's a hard conversation to have at times. I think the polling shows that the American people largely understand and appreciate what we can accomplish with foreign assistance. There's lots of polling data. USGLC does a great job of getting out there into the communities and talking about why global engagement matters and matters to them. I spent a lot of time, my second home is in Kansas. And the Kansas economy is so dependent upon trade and our ability to both our farmers, our aviation industry, so many of these parts, it just really matters. Our global engagement around the world matters to the pocketbooks of your average farmer in Kansas. And part of those efforts should be foreign assistance. Foreign assistance should be helping create the environment where people are wanting and willing to buy Kansas crops. And so you can have these conversations. I think people are willing to have those conversations, but it will take a concerted and thoughtful approach, and one that's really important to have.
As we look forward into really the coming days, weeks, and then months, to get an understanding of what direction and whether or not the administration is seeing foreign assistance as a critical tool for U.S. national security and their America First policy, what are some of the actions or statements or key events that you're going to be looking at to help you further clarify which direction you think the administration will be going in terms of how they see how they will be using the tool of foreign assistance for their priorities?
I think it starts with these hearings this week. It'll be fascinating. I know former Congressman Yoho and Bill Steiger, the former chief of staff at USAID, are testifying in front of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. I know a couple other committees are considering hearings as well. It'll be interesting to see if they have any administration witnesses to sort of talk about current thinking. I think that will be really important. The next big piece is the CR. We're going to have to pass a bill to fund the government. So then sort of really it comes down to where does this rank in the priority list? There are very tight margins. I wish Speaker Johnson the best. I'm so glad that I don't have that job. It's going to be an incredibly difficult task to get to an agreement on this bill. And so there'll be a lot of negotiating, a lot of priorities across the spectrum. We'll see where foreign assistance lies in those conversations. So that'll be the next big piece. And then the president has to come up with a budget. So I don't know when the president's budget is going to be released, whether it's going to be before or after the CR. But he'll come up with a skinny budget that will detail where we go from here, right? Are we going to continue to be in the humanitarian space, in PEPFAR, in global health, in sort of economic growth or environment, education, agriculture, right? Are these types of programs, where are we going to continue to do them? Democracy programs, are we going to continue to fund these programs, or are we looking to a wholesale shift to focus on other things? I don't think you'll see a zero coming out of OMB. Certainly wasn't the profile and approach they took the first time around. And I, given the exemptions that have already been made, I think there is an appreciation. Yeah, we're going to have to keep doing something. We should do them differently. I agree with that. We should definitely continue to reform and improve our foreign assistance efforts. So we'll see where the budget comes out. So those are the first three pieces that will really sort of help shape the conversation over the next 6 to 9 months as we kind of continue to work through our way through this.
All right. Well, Jim, thank you for taking some time to be on the podcast today. Appreciate your insight. I think it's useful as organizations that want to continue supporting U.S. government foreign assistance can take it into consideration. So yeah, thank you again for being on the show.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Aid Market Podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and connect with Mike Shanley on LinkedIn to stay updated on the latest USAID funding trends.